We're going to continue on with our exploration of Taurus Ascendant and the planets of Taurus Ascendant. We want to look at the moon today for Taurus Ascendant. And remember, when we're considering how the planets function for each ascendant, we're taking into consideration a few things here. We're taking into consideration where a planet's exaltation sign is related to that ascendant. We're also considering where the planet's debilitation sign is related to that ascendant, because that will show some innate strengths and weaknesses related to that planet as it applies to the ascendant in question. We also need to consider the house that the planet rules over, because that house gives us insights about how is it going to support an ascendant's expression of dharma, moksha, artha, kama, and so on. So is it going to be a planet that's related more towards inspiration on one's path? Is it going to be related more towards a planet that gives more enjoyment in life? Or is it going to be more wealth and responsibility, or more possibly escapist or liberating for the individual? So for the moon, first off, we need to consider the fact that the moon rules house 3 for a Taurus ascendant. It doesn't rule any other houses. And when it comes to a planet's capacity to give good or difficulty, we have to remember that according to Parashara, some of the most difficult house lords happen to be the 3rd, the 6th, and the 11th in regards to derailing a person from one's natural inspirations and path. So we see the moon is going to be a bit of a controversial or a mixed planet for a Taurus ascendant. And again, the reason it's going to be mixed or controversial is because, number one, the moon rules the 3rd house for a Taurus ascendant, which means it has the capacity to derail a Taurus ascendant from its ability to follow their inspiration or their dharma. It's a yoga breaker. However, we're also going to find that that 3rd Lord moon is exalted in the ascendant itself, in Taurus. So we have to weigh this, and just like everything in life, not everything is cut and dry or straightforward. There's going to be some good and some bad with every planet, with every ascendant. So on one hand, having the moon exalted in the 1st house for a Taurus ascendant shows that the Taurus individual can have a great command of 3rd house things as they relate to the moon, such as what? Creativity, expression, singing, music, things of this nature, all related to the moon. It's also going to show a great capacity to care for one's siblings, to care for one's friends, again, 3rd house things. We're going to see that that moon, the 3rd Lord, is debilitated in the 7th house for a Taurus ascendant. And this is important as well. The 7th house is the area of other people, related to our romantic relationships, but can also be related to our business relationships. And I don't know, maybe you're a Taurus ascendant, maybe you know some Taurus ascendants, but one of the things that you'll find is that Taurus individuals can tend to be quite nostalgic, lovesick, and very attached to their intimate relationships, even to the point that when an intimate relationship passes, they are constantly pining for what has passed. Even if it wasn't that good, they will pine for it because they have this tendency to lose themselves in nostalgia. And this is where we start to see the idea of how the 3rd Lord can negatively impact the relationships for a Taurus ascendant, because it's the 3rd Lord, a difficult house lord for a Taurus ascendant. And it shows up in a negative fashion, debilitated in the 7th house, which is where most of the time a Taurus ascendant is going to get tripped up with the moon. The more they lose themselves in the emotions of others, the more they get caught up in the nostalgia and sentimentality of relationships. It can be wonderful if they're writers and if they are creative individuals, because that can give sort of that deep sorrow which stimulates very popular types of music or poems or whatever it might be. Think about the current state of the world. What's going to be popular? It's going to be this kind of pining for that which was lost. So a Taurus ascendant can really benefit from that. But one of the things the Taurus ascendant needs to be very cautious of is this lovesick nature of the moon. The moon is said to be lovesick. The moon also is fickle. It changes. So while a Taurus ascendant can be very devoted and can be very attached emotionally to the people they get in relationships with, oftentimes Taurus ascendants have difficulty in regards to being a little too fickle in relationships. They have an idea of how things should go. When it doesn't go that way, they get moody, which is related to the moon, which causes some problems in relationships. So we have to be cautious of this for the moon as it relates to a Taurus ascendant, but also seeing that the fact that the moon is exalted in the first house of Taurus, that all those skills, because remember the third house deals with skills, all of those skills related to the moon become exalted for a Taurus ascendant when it's expressing in its highest fashion. And that's going to be when the moon is in the first house, the third lord in the first house. So you can do your research on what are skills of the moon. Well, caring, nurturing for others. Music is a skill related to the moon. Oftentimes people are very good at being popular, being seen, networking. That's related to the moon. Composition can be related to the moon. Herbalism is related to the moon. So there are all these things that can be related to the moon that you can do some research on your own. And if there is a skill related to the moon for a Taurus ascendant, they will typically tend to excel at that skill because the moon rules the third house, which deals with skills, and the third lord is exalted in the first. The moon ruling the third is also a planet of motivation, impulsiveness, and enthusiasm. The moon is representative of how a Taurus can often have waning interests. We already talked about waning, fickle interests related to love and relationships. Well, this can also be true in regards to life. A Taurus ascendant might find that they get interested in one thing for a little while, then as their mood changes, they get interested in another thing. And this is when Taurus ascendants often write to astrologers and say, what is my purpose? I just can't figure out what I'm supposed to get into, what I'm supposed to do. And again, you have to learn to ride out that moon, which means either learn to master your emotions, so therefore you're not overcome by the fickleness of the moon, which yoga practice, meditation can be very good, or ride the wave. When a mood strikes to go write poetry, you go write poetry. When a mood strikes to go start a business, because Taurus ascendants are very good with money and finances, you go start a business. But you have to learn to honor all of those aspects of yourself. And that can be a tricky thing, particularly since the moon gives this sort of fickle nature, this waxing and waning nature with one's interests. That can also be applicable to our peers, our siblings, and our friends. Sometimes we can be all about being friendly, being in a group of our peers, if you're a Taurus ascendant, because that moon might be more full in that regard. It's waxing towards interest in those things. Whereas other times you might not want to be around anybody. No friends, no siblings. You might have negative thoughts, negative ideas about one's siblings. And of course, that's going to be true for everybody in life as things wax and wane. But the Taurus ascendant will tend to feel it more acutely due to the fact that the moon rules the third house for a Taurus ascendant. So overall, the moon can be very good for certain things. But because it rules the third house, it will tend to drive the Taurus ascendant into difficulties due to being overly emotional, overly sentimental, or overly fickle related to the things that the moon represents for the Taurus ascendant.